Welcome to Stockholm. Now, of course, one of the downsides of a virtual festival is the lack of espresso and cinnamon buns. And if you've sorted that out for yourself at home, I salute you. I've got herbal tea, which is slightly disappointing. The upsides are slightly warmer temperatures for those of us to the south of Sweden and a more international audience and panel than might have otherwise been possible. We're here today to talk about creating a more circular economy and the role that using waste as a raw material can play in bringing about that shift. I'm Katie Tridden, author of Wasted, When Trash Becomes Treasure, and a journalist, podcaster, and keynote speaker. And I'm dialing in from Cornwall in the UK. Joining me to explore this timely and important topic from Norway are Christian Logard, Senior VP of Products and Brands at Flock, Susie Yaren, Sustainable Research Manager at Sintef, and Jan Christian Vestra, owner and CEO of Vestra. And from the south of France, we have Simon Hamilton, interior designer and founder of Design Career Consulting. And thanks so much for all giving us a wave so we know who's who. That's great. So welcome, Christian, Susie, Jan Christian, and Simon, and welcome to you wherever you are in the world. If you've got questions as we go through, just pop those into the questions box or the chat, and we will get to those towards the end of the talk. Now, Susie, I'd like to start with you, if I may. If we are to move from a linear take, make, waste model towards creating something more circular, it makes sense to start using waste rather than virgin materials. And in fact, the second tenet of the circular economy, according to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, is to keep objects and materials in use. So reducing waste is a great way to keep it out of landfill. And we've certainly got a lot of waste. Just to use plastic as one example, 79% of all the plastic produced since production really got started in the 1950s is still with us. So why aren't more people using waste as a raw material? What are some of the barriers from transforming waste into new products?
Well, until recently, there's not really been any incentive to. People haven't needed to, there hasn't been any interest in doing it. And plastic in particular, it wasn't that long ago that plastic was this brand new material with all its fantastic properties. And in fact, it's so fantastic that it's sort of been a victim of its own popularity. And that's why we have the problem today. So it's only, in the last few years, at least, it's come into public awareness that the volumes of waste of plastic are actually very problematic. And so, yeah, this is part of a study that, say, for example, we in Sintef have been carrying out together with Flock. It's like, okay, there are mounds of plastic out there, and there are people that want to use them. And why can't they meet in the middle? Literally, our research project could have been called "What's the Problem, Guys?" So there are various different problems. First, the technical. The plastic sitting in that big rubbish pile. It's not sorted, it's not necessarily of a type that can be recycled, it could be very contaminated, and we just don't know. And the other thing is you don't know how much of it is there, and you don't know if it's going to be continuously there for a long time. So when people like Flock are trying to use plastic in their production, they need to know that they're going to have a quality that they can recycle, that it's going to be in a stable supply that they can rely on for a few years, so that they're not going to get different materials coming in, because their production is really tweaked. It's a precision process to produce quality products, and it has to have a robust supply stream in. So there's also technical issues there. There's also economic issues. The price of recycled plastic has to compete with the price of virgin plastic, and virgin plastic follows the oil price, and well, that's pretty low at the moment. So there's a bit of a tension there. And the last of all is regulatory. All the regulations and the government's documentation that you need to go with plastic and products and so on, it's all set up for a linear model. So these requirements that you know exactly what's in your product, they're there to protect us as consumers, but they're written based on a system that we're trying to move away from. So there's a lot of hangovers, problems, just bottlenecks left over from the linear system that we just have to slice and dice our way through as we go towards a circular economy.
That's a brilliant summary of a very complex problem, so thank you, Susie. Christian, you work with Susie and Sintef to identify some waste streams that Flock might be able to use, and one of those was snowplow sticks. Now, could you start by explaining for the non-Norwegians amongst us what snowplow sticks are, and then perhaps talk us through how you turned this quite unique waste product into a successful product and some of the barriers you had to overcome to do that?
Yeah, so like Stacey said, like Susie said, it's the scope of the project was actually much wider than just this material fraction. We looked at barriers to circularity in total. So from business models to supply chains, new sources of post-consumer waste, already used pre-owned material that we could take in and increase our consumptions of waste, expand into new categories. And the snowplow markers, they just happen to be one such fraction which wasn't cherished and hadn't been addressed until now. And what they are, if you drive the mountains of the Nordics in winter, you'll experience that the snow just removes any trace of where the roads actually are. It's just a complete whiteout. So to enable the snowplow drivers to navigate this scenic landscape safely in winter, there's bright red sticks marking the curbsides, lining these roads so that they can actually navigate them safely. And even if you cross these mountains in your own car in winter, which can be quite an experience, it's kind of a reassuring visual element to us, right? You're safe. It's kind of the lighthouses of the mountains, if you like. So that's what they are. And then come spring, come thaw, they're all collected, and most of them are in good nick and will be reused for the next season. But it's rough conditions. It's snow plows, it's ice, it's it's rough. So a fair bit are also broken, and it's all collected, so it's not left in nature. But until now, these broken ones were by and large burned. So at best, they were burned for energy recovery, and we decided to this was a good one. Why don't we capture this? And there's literally thousands of kilometers of these roads that are marked in this way. So why couldn't we capture those? So we captured them. It was granulated, and it looks kind of like what I have in the glass, so small red granules. And and then we colored them to a slightly darker tan. And had them tested and used for a limited batch of our product Hållkapisco Puls, turning it into a pleasant product. So that's the plow stick markers, and it's a limited edition of the 200 chairs that we for this season were able to make from that source. But it's much more than that, of course, because it serves as a mission statement to a lot of things for us.
So this project's obviously come at the end of a long period of time of you experimenting with post-consumer plastic waste. So what are some of the barriers that have come to get to a point where you could relatively simply turn plow sticks into an office chair?
Exactly, yeah. So we introduced post-consumer recycled plastics back in 1995. So very, very early on. And we scaled this gradually upwards as we could get our hands on more material. And then some 15 years ago, we were starting to all of a sudden, quite abruptly, experience fractures. Products actually broke under load in the market. And this is you can't have that. People can get hurt. So we obviously had to stop. What had happened was that somewhere down in our value chain, in the collecting points and in the sorting facilities, there had been a fire. So even if our supplier was the same, even if the specification was the same, just the source, the collecting point and the sorting facility had changed. And this turned out to bring about a small change in the mechanical properties, and we were closer to the boundary than we thought back then. So from just about strong enough, good enough for absolutely everyone, perfectly safe, it just passed the border, and the products were no longer safe. So effectively, this took us back to square one, all the way back to square one. What we had done from 1995 and up to that date. And this I think is a good example of how persistent you have to be to push these kind of developments, because what we actually did was said, okay, let's see if we can control these qualities in a better way. Let's introduce monitoring instruments throughout. Let's do lab tests. Let's revise our engineering practices to make sure that we A, know what this material realistically can do, and then B, know how to engineer for it so that we can create robust constructions, robust designs that are safe and have a full content, or that as high as possible a content of post-consumer recycled material. And in 2018, by 2018, we were back up on 543 tons, metric tons of plastics. That's a fair bit of the kind of plastic waste you have in your kitchen. 2019 saw 649 metric tons. For 2020, we're still counting, but we aimed for 800 tons. And this journey has now been so successful to us that we decided to pull our ambition to reach 1,000 metric tons of waste turned into high quality, lasting, good products. One year towards us. So that's what we're after for 2021. 1,000 metric tons.
That's an amazing achievement. And I think it's interesting you used the word persistent there. This is one of my favorite books, which I highly recommend to anybody interested in this sort of stuff. And they talk about the 3 mindsets that you need to adopt. And one of them is stubborn optimism, which sounds a lot like persistence. And I think absolutely. And it can,
and the story, it proves it can be done. This can be navigated, even if it's complex.
I think we need to maintain that sense of stubborn optimism. Simon, I'd love to come to you now, if I may. It's all very well companies like Flock overcoming all these barriers and all these difficulties and staying stubbornly optimistic to create products like the Hawk chair, but there are further barriers at specification stage, right? How receptive are your interior design clients to products that are made from waste, and how is that starting to shift?
Yes, you're right, Katie, because clients can start a project being enthusiastic about the environment and sustainability and things like that. But what does get in the way often is perhaps ego, because they have things that they may want to include in the project, perhaps things that are a status symbol. There may be things that they already own, which is a good thing, because then at least they're kind of in some ways recycling and having some heritage pieces or vintage pieces within a scheme. But I would say that to really convince a client, because sometimes it is a bit of a story you have to tell them, because you're trying to say, look, this is a good thing, this product is going to make your life better, and it is just as luxurious as something you might see elsewhere. But to add to that, they don't always have access to things. So it's about clients seeing things. And I think if the high street were to adopt a more sustainable attitude in terms of products, so brands that you see on the high street where people go and buy furniture, not all the clients I work with are residential, but that's a market that is really big and very busy, and if they were to adopt a sort of sustainable attitude in terms of the products that they show and they sell, that would really absolutely help. Now, I used to be manager of Interface, which is one of the leading, manufacturers of carpet tiles in the world, and they have had an amazing policy in terms of zero emissions, and way back since 1994, when Ray Anderson, made that statement, and their mission to be zero by 2020, they've reached that, and they're going on to other things now. And even then, I was, working with specifiers and designers and architects that would come into the showroom. Even then, it was difficult to convince them that what Interface were producing was a good thing and what they were talking about. So I think it also starts with the industry itself, that specifiers, designers, architects, and people that are in charge of projects need to be informed and then pass that message on to their clients, whether their clients are commercial or residential. So it's not just a straightforward thing that you've got to blame the clients because they're not really aware, they're not engaging with it, but they need to kind of be educated, and I think that will help. And also, one other last thing I'd say is that when I've been dealing with clients more recently, that they are time poor, so they don't want to go to several different places. They want to see everything in one sort of shot, and that's not always possible. So, you know, I think it's a combination of things, really. It's not just one element, but I think those hurdles can be overcome, and it's really about educating an approach. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, and that's why conversations like this are so important, I think, aren't they? You've got personal experience on this subject as well, and I would love to talk to you about the furniture that your partner James makes and your restoration projects in France, and how that could perhaps be a bit of a test case to demonstrate to clients how products and furniture made from waste can be beautiful and elegant and luxurious.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have. I mean, you know, it all started way back when we first lived in Hackney in East London, and it was the sort of 90s, and there were a lot of people doing renovations and refurbishments, and there would be lots of sort of skips, which people don't know is skips, just a large metal container where you'd put the rubbish from a building project into. And you would kind of rummage through these skips and find things and think, well, if that's being thrown away, maybe I can do something with it. So we started doing that. Well, that was to be creative, that was to save money. And one of the things that we found that we still got is some air conditioning ducting, which then we used, or James made into the legs of a dining table, and then floor joists he got from a salvage yard, because salvage yards, they were really kind of popular then. And it's a table that was really solid, and we still have it. And then that kind of, you know, continued into other things in the house. And so there was a washing machine drum that we made into a table, just putting some glass on top of it. And then you kind of fast forward with that sort of thinking to where we are now, because we've kind of relocated to France and we're going to be renovating a house. We're thinking we want to adopt that same sort of approach, so that we're not just going to be using things that are brand new and they have to come and travel from a long way, but actually we're thinking about using things that might exist. And that could be something like, you know, there's another example of what James made. It's a tree in the garden where we had, you know, the house in Hackney, it died, and rather than throwing it away or burning it, he cut it down, brought it inside, and made a light fitting with it. So it's almost like a memory of the tree, but it's also something very practical. So what we want to do when we do finally find somewhere here in France to kind of renovate is to introduce those ideas and you know, make something that is personal, but also try to reuse something that's existing. So, you know, he set up an Instagram account, which is Repurpose and Make. And there's a few items on there, and one of those is a lampshade where it's just made out of some old bits of paper that we had lying around and some wooden clothes pegs, but it produces the loveliest glow, and it's really, really pretty and beautiful. And there's a few other items on there as well. So, you know, that's the sort of thing we want to do, is to really introduce that, so that we can bring things in that may be machine made, such as, like, is another thing he made, which is a breadboard, which is something that's already bought and made for a certain purpose. But then, you know, because he's worked in film and as a cinematographer, he's got bits of equipment left, and he put a tripod on the base of it, so it becomes a coffee table. So it's really using things that are already around and thinking of how they can have a second life. And not necessarily throwing them out, but actually making them have a longer life and then continue. And, you know, if you have to kind of chop them up or whatever, you then make something out of it. So it's that kind of philosophy and approach, and we're really excited about it.
And I think you touched on something there really, which is really important, which is that when you make something from something that's had a previous life, it brings a story. And I think people are increasingly interested in these sort of storied objects. Christian, you've touched on this a little bit already, but the commitment to environmentalism at Flock runs much deeper than one project, doesn't it? Could you give us a little bit of context about Flock's history in the environmental space and kind of what's brought you to this point?
Yeah, sure. So at least in this country, we were the first company to employ a dedicated environmentals manager already in 1990. And then in 1993, we established the circular design criteria, a set of 5 design criteria that we deploy still today. to ensure that we embrace the total of this this challenge. I mentioned the introduction of post-consumer recycled plastics in '95. We published the first EPD as the first furniture manufacturer on the planet in 2003. We moved our sustainability reporting to GRI level in 2011. And, you know, we pushed all the way through. We pushed really, really hard to bring down the energy intensity and the climate intensity of our products. We've passed the 60% by weight barrier on post-consumer recycled material. You know, complete product, 60% of it former waste. With our recent launches, and we have quite a nice lineup where we're in the 50 to 60% waste. So effectively, you know, we're producing, designing and producing high quality, high value products while cleaning the planet. So what this 5-3, this circular design criteria of ours, what they try to describe and to provide so the guiding stars on is to consider. Of course, you know, on the one hand, we have to create objects that are actually useful, that are needed, that will be cherished and kept for a long time, that can be repaired and will be repaired, and then at the end of life, it can be dismantled and repurposed somehow. So that's, you know, that's all good, of course, imperative. But the thing is, the mission can't start there, or we can't leave it at that. Because if I buy a high quality iconic object today, the minute that impacts the environment is, you know, is 15 years from now, isn't it? It's when I would otherwise have acquired a replacement for that product, right? And I don't think Greta Thunberg would be, you know, happy about that timeline, would she? So, you know, we have to do both, right? We have to, you know, to ensure we do useful, proper, valuable, lovable products, you know, that our children will fight over when we're under the turf, right? That's the one aspiration, and we have to do it with as little a footprint as we possibly can. And that's where the this mission on migrating and using every year more post-consumer waste in the products. So and where this plastic story also comes in, because, you know, it's one element, but it points at this scaling, and it also points at how we need to scale this further. We do, and we all do together, to cherish these resources, value them, and you know, and turn the waste into valuable products. And you know, with the plastics, we were able to identify a source with a relatively stable quality and a relatively stable color. But, you know, it's still a limited quantity, and normally what you'd get is a kind of a mix like this, right? You know, all sorts of colors together. Until recently, this is what we could get. And if you know, once you melt it, it will look like this, some kind of gray red-ish color, not very attractive. This is, of course, limiting us in terms of how we can create inspiring interior objects. So, you know, because, you know, the only thing you can do to this is basically color it black, right? And that's also what the plastics mission does. It introduces color, and these days also there's every week new sorting facilities erected that sort waste also on color. But the thing is, you know, one season it will be plastics, the next season it will be something from agriculture. You know, sometimes it will be, if we're going to, you know, bring this journey to its ultimate destination. It's going to be, you know, ocean plastic, something from marine applications for some period of time, and then, you know, something else. Then some sources will be stable, some sources will be less stable. And you know, as designers and architects, I think this is challenging, because we were all taught that control and precision is an ambition, right? That's what we are trained to aspire to. And in terms of surface finishes, in terms of colors, this will have to go. Even in products that appear to be visually not so explicitly repurposed as Simon's examples were, we will have to include signs of lived life, of past use of materials. We'll have to embrace these kind of imperfections going forward. And this is, and we'll have to live with, beautiful color palettes that might expire because the source is empty, and we can't do another one, and we can't justify doing it with virgin material. So yeah, so it's this is where I think we need to be heading together. We need to scale this up. We need to capture all the sources that we can identify, find new purposes for it. And to us, the next steps are scale, and then introduce color, and be bold, embrace this variation, and just like Simon says, maybe it's even 5 years from now, maybe the majority of us will actually prefer it. Maybe we will have left this ideal of precision and control slightly behind us.
I think certainly that idea of embracing imperfection is something that seems to be coming through. But I think you're right about the importance of colour. As Simon said, this has got to work within an interior, and it can't always be black. So that's really important. Christian, I'd love to bring you in now, if I may. Flock might have been the first company to publish environmental product declarations, or EPDs. And for anybody who doesn't know, those assess the environmental impact of a product's entire life cycle, and they're independently verified. So they're kind of a super important measure of, I guess, kind of making sure that we're not all marking our own homework here. Someone else is kind of making sure that we've got the maths right on stuff. And they look at the whole life cycle, that point that Christian just made about the beginning of a product, but also its end of life. But Vestra is the first company to complete that process for its entire catalogue. First company in the world. That's an incredible achievement. Why was it important to you to undergo this process? Because it must have been a ton of work and a ton of time. So why was that something that was so important to your business?
Yes, thank you, Katie. I just have to say that Flock is a big inspiration to us, and great stuff. And we're kind of this small company in the big picture, but still we can move fast forward. And I have to admit that sometimes we make things more complicated than they really are, because we make all the EPDs. I'm not sure if I can tell you, but I think in, let's say, 6 months or something, but it was something we focused on. And I've heard so many companies saying, oh, it's way too difficult, it's way too expensive, we don't have the tools, we don't know where to start. But I'm sorry to say, but that's nonsense, because if you are willing to do it, if you're willing to focus on what's really important in the world today, everything is possible. So, I mean, stop talking, start doing. Less talk, more action. That's the philosophy. And you asked why we are doing it. Well, we believe in transparency. We believe in democracy. We want to share things. I mean, it's really urgent now. We have years to solve the climate crisis. We have to stop the attacks on nature, on biodiversity. We have to restore nature. We have to not only fulfill, but over-fulfill the Paris Agreement, and it's urgent. We all have to step up, and we want our clients to make informed choices. We want to bring awareness of what kind of climate impact does a product come with in terms of carbon emissions, but also in terms of energy and what kind of energy you put into the product, so that the clients can make informed, better decisions, but also that we can bring awareness in our own organization so that we can improve every year towards a future where there are no emissions. And to be honest, I really don't understand why we haven't done anything about this. I mean, the politicians already, because if I was to decide, I would have, first of all, banned all products designed to have a short lifespan, because this throwaway culture is way out of control. We really have to end this now, and it's not that difficult. I mean, if you cannot deliver quality, if you cannot deliver warranties, if you cannot deliver the possibility for your clients to send the pieces of the object or the furniture back to the factory, get it restored, refurbished, I mean, you should not be able to compete in the market today. So that's number one. Start by banning products designed to have a short lifespan. And number two, of course, we can regulate this by law. We can tell all European manufacturers within the EU that you have 2 years from now, or 3 years, or 5 years, but after that period of time, EPD should not be something you can do if you want to do it anymore, but that should be something that goes with all products, because then people can make informed choices. Then we can start by saying that the furniture is not a furniture, an object is not an object. People can actually choose the better alternative for the climate, and I mean, we can sort this. But again, we have to do it. We can do it. It's not that difficult if we focus more on real action instead of just talking about it, as we have let way too many companies do now for way too many years.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's amazing what you can definitely make something non-negotiable, right? Everything is too hard, out. But the moment something's non-negotiable, find a way. And yeah, that's really inspiring. Thank you, Jan Christian. Simon, on a slightly different note, I know you're very passionate about diversity and inclusion, and you're working with organisations like United in Design and Decolonise Networking to bring equality to the design industry. But why is it particularly important that we listen to marginalised voices, bring them into the conversation around sustainability?
I think because, I mean, in my experience, and maybe too general statement I'm going to make, but it's not a common part of Black culture to be aware of the environment or to be part of the discussion. Maybe that's because, you know, in my upbringing, maybe it's different in other people's upbringing, but I would say that, you know, Black culture in the UK has been influenced by American culture in terms of music and fashion and food. And, you know, there is a kind of a desire to show that you've escaped the kind of oppressive space that you're in, whether it's in a kind of council estate or something like that, to show that you are successful, and that is a material thing. So actually having more is seen as a good thing. So, you know, you can see lots of videos, perhaps more in the past than now, where you've got Black musicians who have big cars, houses, jewelry, and, you know, fancy labels and that sort of thing. So it's a very much a consumerist approach to say, yeah, I've done it, I've made it out of the ghetto and I'm doing well and I want to show everybody. So, you know, being aware of the environment and something that's sustainable and all of those sort of things is not something that I would say is very common and typical of those groups that are kind of, you know, underrepresented. And I think that has to change. I mean, I've been to lots of musical festivals. I've been to Glastonbury 3 times, been to Latitude, and I'm one of the minority of Black people that go to that. And those festivals are very much about leaving no trace, about the environment, about, you know, people coming together and doing good. So I think that's another area that could be changed. It's actually, the message can get through in lots of different ways. You know, and working with BIID, part of their new committee, Diversity and Inclusion, is very much about trying to reach those people who are marginalised, who are not represented, who are not getting opportunities. You know, with United in Design, they've created an apprenticeship scheme for some very talented interior designers. Most of them have got first-class degrees, but have not got any jobs. They've been pushed out. And I think, you know, once they are included, once they can see role models, once they kind of get representation, then they can become part of the conversation about all sorts of issues. And I think it's such a deep thing that it's not going to happen and change overnight. It's going to take quite some time, but it's really good that there are people and there are platforms now allowing the conversation to happen, and that there is a better sort of opportunity for the change that we need to make. So I'm hoping that, yes, more people will kind of stand up and say, yeah, I do care about the environment. My brother, last thing I say, my brother's a perfect example, got 2 brothers, 2 sisters. He drives a London bus every day So he's in the middle of all the kind of pollution and smoke and everything. He's bought a Tesla because he does care about the environment, and he can see the advantage of having a zero emission vehicle. So hopefully he'll pass that on to his kids. So, you know, that's somebody that is doing something in a kind of marginalized area, if you like, but it's quite different.
I think you touched on an important point there, because women and people of colour are disproportionately affected by climate change. And if you're closer to the problem, you're necessarily closer to the solution. And there's another quote from another book. This is an amazing book on environmentalism. It's a collection of women writers, short essays and poems. And there's a quote in the introduction that says, to change everything, we need everyone. And I think that's the point, is that this can't be, you know, a sort of sort of narrow white middle class activity. We need the whole population to sort of get on board with this change. And I do think we need to listen to a broader selection of voices. So thanks for that perspective, Simon. Christian Flock's commitment to environmental issues extends into social issues as well, doesn't it? Social justice. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, it does. Very inspiring, by the way, Simon. You know, let's start by raising three fundamental questions in this. You know, first one, you know, to what extent is it okay to build our private consumption, or as business owners or professionals, our profitability, you know, by climbing up on the shoulders of poor working conditions and poor wages elsewhere? You know, to what extent is that really okay? How can we you know, live with such a situation? How can we not, you know, either try to bring it closer to us, or at least engage in it, right? That's the first question. The second question into this would be, you know, if material consumption and energy consumption is so imperative to reduce the environmental footprints of a manufacturing company like ours, like Jan Christian's, how can you live with receiving your goods or your semi-finished produce in containers from somewhere far? How can you not control your value chain, right? And then the third question is again touching on the social bit, and that is, of course, how do we defend our welfare states going forward? How can we uphold you know, social security, healthcare to all? How can we avoid social unrest, disruption of the societies that we're seeing in some parts of the world these days? How and what's our role as designers or as industry players? And you know, and the question then is, how can we not make sure that there is opportunity for everyone in, you know, in our own societies, in our own regions, right? That, you know, realize that there is diversity. You know, people come from all sorts of backgrounds. Some were fortunate, had an easy time at school. Some had to struggle harder. Some come from safe environments, healthy surroundings. Some are refugees. You know, how can we not take the responsibility of making sure that there is businesses, there is an economy that embraces and realizes the value of, you know, the population we actually have. And the thing is that all these three questions, they converge at the same point. You know, the answers to this, they all arrive at the same destination, which is that as designers, as industry players, as business owners, we need really to pay very close attention to how efficient we manufacture. You know, we need to be really industrial where we can. We need to be, you know, careful. Do proper with craftsmanship, include craftsmanship where it provides value, but we really need to up the scale, keep developing on a resource efficient manner, so that we can actually maintain production, maintain these kind of businesses in, you know, the regions where we are, right? That's you know, that's the answer to all these three questions. And, you know, while of course for a big company we also have to do things to our factory structure from time to time, we are extremely committed to the local communities where we operate, and to the factory sites we have. We invest in them. We engineer for it and make sure that that we don't rely on choices taken by other people, but that we stay on top of this and make sure that we push for the improvements that really matter, wherever they are in our value chain. So for us, manufacturing company, 90% of our footprint is down to the products. If you dive into the products, 95% of the emissions that they bring about is down to the materials. How can we not control this? And the thing is, the point I'm trying to make is that we have a choice, right? We have a choice. We can choose to climb up on the shoulders of poor working conditions, to keep our eyes shut to what is happening downstream in the supply chain. We can, as designers and engineers, we can produce designs that are so elaborate and so complex to produce that they are either unobtainable to normal people or normal communities, or they have to be produced under working conditions we really cannot stand for. We can do that, or we can roll our sleeves up and make sure that we design properly so that it can be produced efficiently, can be produced with as little environmental footprint, as well prepared for a circular business model also in the future as is possible. This is doable, but we have to, like Jan Christian said, we have to want it. We have to have the ambition to actually mobilize the energy and go for it, and then it can be done. It's a choice we have, and this is really important to us. This is why we are so committed to doing our own stuff, controlling our own value chains, being fully informed, full transparency of what is involved and what is of the impacts of that is, and continuing to invest in the factories and in better products, better services still. And I guess, Jan Christian, that's probably why you're building the new factory as well, right? Because of this exactly same consideration, that these three questions, they arrive at the same destination, and we don't want to see our welfare states, these embracing inclusive societies, deteriorate.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to look at this stuff that it's not a sacrifice. Actually, we can get all these things working together, so that in our favour. Yeah, Christian, I can see you cheering Christian on in the background there. Vestra has adopted a triple bottom line model, so that's people, planet, and profit. Could you tell us a little bit more, firstly, about what that model means, and secondly, how the people part specifically manifests in your business?
Yes, Katie. Many years ago, I read an article from his name is Milton Friedman. He's one of the, how can I say, founding fathers of the modern capitalism. Very influential guy, American. And he stated that the business of business is business, meaning that the only social responsibility a private company has is to increase its profits. So as long as we can increase our profits, no matter what, doesn't matter anything else. And to me, that's really bad and really wrong, because we cannot shut our eyes to the fact that we are living in a world with a lot of challenges. More people are living in poverty, injustice, the climate changes, and we can simply not shut our eyes to that fact. And let's say, hope that Donald Trump or Boris Johnson or someone else should take care of that, because we have to step up as well as private companies. So that's the first thing. Second, if I may be a bit personal, I took over the responsibility of this company at the age of 25. My father passed away. It's a family-owned business. We still are. And at that time, I was not thinking too much about furniture, is that the way I can put it? As a 25-year, I came from politics, NGOs. I cared about environment, not furniture, actually. So at that point, I decided together with my colleagues that, okay, Vestra is not a furniture company. Vestra is a tool to change the world. We want to use Vestra as a tool to bring prosperity, to bring improvement, to actually become something bigger than just profit, maximizing profits. And we are using our furniture and the company as a tool to actually bring change. And some people find that naive, but I don't care, because naive people, they end up by actually changing the world. So I'm totally fine with that. Maybe I'm naive, doesn't matter, because I know we will change the world. So what we did then is to integrate 9 out of the 17 sustainable development goals into our business model. Of course, we need to be profitable, because we will create new jobs, we will pay taxes, and we do pay taxes. We don't do any tax plannings or anything like that, because we also invest in the welfare state in all countries where we operate. And we have to be profitable to be able to make new investments in new technology, climate solutions, and stuff like that. But we are not making money on things that we find immoral. For instance, hostile designs. And hostile designs, for instance, benches, public benches with spikes and other obstacles designed to keep homeless people away from our streets. And we simply don't do that. So we refuse to make projects where hostile designs are involved, meaning we have to say no thanks to potential huge projects around the world, which would have been very profitable to us, but I simply don't want to make money on things that are bad. And if we have created a society where some people can't afford a proper place to live, that's something we have to deal with by political reforms, by social reforms. It's real injustice, and I will not be a part of that injustice by bringing hostile designs into our city, the cities and public spaces. So that's one thing we do, that we refuse to make projects with the opposite purpose, because design can have a good purpose and design can have a bad purpose. Second, we are, the philosophy behind our company is to bring people together. And there are a few things we have to be worried about in the world today. One thing is obviously the climate changes, but I'm a bit more optimistic on that one, because I believe in new technology. We have created this challenge and we can solve this problem together. So I think we will. I'm actually more worried about the situation we have in the world today, where the debate is getting more and more polarized. We see tendencies towards more conflicts, less trust, less cohesion between people. You can see in many European countries, people are categorizing people as us and them instead of we. And we know too well from our world history what ideologies and values like that might lead to. So we all have a responsibility to try to prevent that, and by actually bringing people together, because I believe when people are brought together, we share life ideas, we share stories, we get to know each other, and we get more trust between people. So our philosophy is actually not selling as many furniture as possible. Our mission is to bring as many people together as possible by creating social meeting places. We call them arenas for everyday democracy, where we can, foster inclusion, celebrate our diversity, and actually bringing people together. Because when people are brought together, we see less conflicts and more trust and cohesion. And that's a social responsibility. Combined with the fact that we refuse to make hostile designs, which is really, really important, because I think in the long run, we will be able to change the world by doing that. And I remember I told you about the SDGs. SDG 8 is about decency and decent work. So we have traceability and transparency in our entire value chain. We were one of the first members in the Ethical Trade Initiative. We provide jobs to people with gaps in their CVs, for instance. We provide microcredits, microfinancial measures in many countries to let people, create their own jobs and their own workshops, their own industries based on the knowledge from Vestre and the design and manufacturing. And I'm also very proud to say that every year we set aside 10% of our net income, which we share. Because remember, the 17 sustainability goals is about 3 things. It's about solving the climate change. It's about prevent injustice between people, and it is to get rid of poverty. 3 things. And to be able to do those 3 things will take, billions of dollars to make the world a better place. And I believe that private companies should also be part of that financial thing. It's not only the states and the politicians and the taxpayers, it's also we as a private company. And if every Norwegian company had done as Vestre, to give 10% of our net income every year to sustainable projects around the world, the Norwegian industry alone would have matched the entire Norwegian foreign aid budget twice over. Meaning Norway, as a small community, could have stepped up by sharing 3 aid budgets to the world, which mean that the tiny country of Norway could have financed education to all the 60 million children in the world today, which don't have access to education. So sharing is caring. We have to be profitable, but that's not enough. Milton Friedman is wrong. He was wrong. And we, I mean, the new ideologies now, we have to share more, and we should stop earning money on things that are bad for environment, bad for people, bad for nature, because we can do much better than today. And I believe in people. I believe in decision makers. I believe in clients. I think if more private companies actually ask themselves, how can we actually contribute to saving this planet? I mean, the movement we can create together, the change we can bring to the world together is amazing. So let's start now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a couple of things that are really important there. One is your both and approach to that dilemma you were faced with at 25. You know, you were off on a career path that you were very passionate about. Your dad died unexpectedly, and you had to decide, were you going to take over the family business? Now, you could have looked at that and said, do I follow my dreams and stick with the NGO route, or do I take over the family business? But actually, you found a way to do both. And I think that both and mentality is really important in this stuff. You know, it doesn't have to be a sacrifice. There can be, you know, ways that we can bring about this change in a way that's really, really positive. And I think the other thing you bring up that's really important there is this idea of intersectionality and the fact that, you know, social justice and environmentalism are not two separate things. They're kind of so knitted together. And I think that's really, really important. Now, I'm going to come to Susie because I'm conscious that we haven't had a question for Susie in a while. I've got 2 or 3 more questions for the panel. They're all for Susie, but I just want to give the audience a warning that I've only got 2 or 3 questions left. So I can see some questions have started to come into the question box, but if you've got questions for the panel, get them in that box now, and then I will come to you after I've spoken to Susie about these last few points. So firstly, Susie, I would love to talk to you about something we haven't covered, which I thought we might, which is the opportunity that exists within salmon farming equipment as perhaps another sort of waste stream, a sort of another snow plough sticks example, and then we'll get onto some slightly deeper stuff.
The salmon farming example is just another waste stream that popped up in the course of this project together with Flock, is when we were identifying where are these mountains of plastic, and salmon farming, this is a big thing in Norway. You have these big salmon farms where you have a pen where you grow your salmon up, and they're huge, and this is actually creating many tons of tens of thousands of tons of clean, reliable plastic of the exact right quality that Flock could use in their production, but it's just not being used in the products today. And finding out where are the barriers here and how can we break through this issue so that can be available for companies like Flock going into the future. So yeah, the salmon farming is just one example of a waste stream that is there, it's sitting there, it's available, but at the same time not available. So how can we resolve these issues? But I'm really interested to follow up on what Jan Christian was saying, because I think also within the work that we're doing, like it's really talking about circular economy and the effects we can have in using waste streams. Actually, if we lift our perspective a little bit and look at the global scenario, what happens if everybody does like Flock and like Vestre and starts implementing the circular economy on a global scale? And that's when it gets really interesting, because a study we did with the International Labour Organization showed that if everybody behaved like Jan Christian and Christian, we could actually have a growth of jobs globally to the tune of about 2.5%, and that's a lot of jobs. But more importantly, those new jobs created are in the fraction society, that exactly those who want to help. These are low to medium qualified, typically service industry jobs, so typically women. And the low to medium qualified women that's exactly the fraction of society that we want to empower going forward. That's how we also address the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is a circular economy. It's not just good for business in the individual organizations, but on a global scale, it can really be a tool to achieve, to overcome a lot of the problems that we have. And then the other side of it is, of course, we're talking about using waste as products. And there's a lot of focus on plastic waste and, oh, the terrible damage it's doing to the ocean, and it is, and I don't want to minimize that. But what a lot of people forget is that the waste that ends up in the ocean is often collected on land first. And globally, there are so many huge mega dump sites where this plastic waste is collected. And this is plastic waste that is going, in these waste streams being exported from countries like Norway and Britain and going to other places where it's collected in a massive dump site. And there's about 64 million people living on these dump sites. And about 1,000 deaths, human deaths per year, are directly associated with living on those dump sites. And about 8.5 million of them, also 8.5 million more deaths, can be sort of by-effects of living in this incredibly polluted environment. So again, this is impacting exactly the low and medium income demographics in low and medium income countries. So these are exactly the same people like Young Christian are trying to lift up and empower. So the circular economy can be a fantastic tool for addressing all of these issues, as well as creating good business opportunities. I know, like, Young Christian doesn't want to talk about business, but if you don't want to move away from the idea that, a lot of people have stakeholders that they have to keep happy, and shareholders and so on, so you can do good business and resolve a lot of the problems as well at the same time. I think that's a really important point to understand here.
Absolutely, thank you, Susie. And that was going to be my next question. Could you dig into that report a little bit more? Because to this point of to change everything, we need everybody. One of the things that report looked into would what would happen if just Norway moved to a circular economy, and perhaps we could extrapolate that out to just developed nations, and the differences between what happens if some of us do it versus all of us do it. Would you mind just digging into that a little bit for me?
Yeah, so we looked at what would happen if just Norway changed, so nobody else in the world, just Norway changed, what would be the impact? And actually what we saw is that Norway is a country, we import a lot of our consumer goods, and we consume a lot. We consume a lot of electronics and things like that. And I don't want to talk that down, because actually our level of consumption means that we have a good quality of life, and we have a lot of things. It's not necessarily just McDonald's Happy Meal toys or so on. These are tools that we use to give us a better quality of life. Children here typically would have access to the electronic tools they need in order to be homeschooled during Corona and so on. So higher levels of consumption is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as it doesn't lead to enormous amounts of waste and so on. So in Norway, we have incredibly high levels of consumption and waste, but we typically import all the goods. So what we looked at is that if we implemented circular economic models here and did more repairing here, what we would do is actually shift value creation, should I say, away from these production countries, so typically non-OECD countries, for example, China and Asia and so on. And we would shift that value creation and those jobs here to Norway. So win-win for Norway. That sounds great. We would turn it into repair or leasing services here in Norway. We would also then have a really good effect. We would have a much lower impact on greenhouse gas emissions. So greenhouse gas emissions from production in these non-OECD countries would disappear as well. But actually, when you think about it, what we're effectively doing is taking those jobs, the lower medium income jobs from the non-OECD countries. So again, typically these women, your sewing lady who's working in a sewing factory in Bangladesh, for example, we're taking that kind of job and turning it into a repair job here in Norway. So there are pros and cons and goods and bads. And the whole point is that we need to, when we're redesigning this new system, and that's where we are today in the circular economy, we're redesigning the whole system. And we need to think carefully about what we're doing to make sure that the choices that we're making are good and that they are fair for everybody. And so that this whole transition is literally a just transition, that it is just for everybody.
And I think that's a really important point to make. And I'm conscious that we haven't got a ton of time for audience questions, so I'm gonna pick a couple from the chat. Just to say, if I don't get to your question, please feel free to fire it over to @flock_design on Instagram, and they will make sure that we scoop up any questions we've missed. So first question for Christian: where are the snow sticks originally manufactured, and where is the plastic broken down and remolded into those little flakes that you showed that Flock use?
Good question. I actually don't know where they're originally manufactured. I don't know. They're collected here in Norway, granulated in Norway, cleaned, and then shipped to a molding operation that is a partner of ours in Sweden, and then shipped to Norway for assembly again in our factory in Røros.
Brilliant, thank you. Somebody has asked a question about those 3 mindsets I mentioned. So this was the book, The Future We Choose, and the 3 mindsets were stubborn optimism, endless abundance, and radical regeneration. And I highly recommend reading this book if you're interested in these sort of things. I'm not on commission, I just think it's an amazing book. Question for the whole panel: I'm curious about whether 3D printing will become another production method that will be used in the near future for furniture. Does Flock see a print on demand instead of producing to stock system as part of the solution to this problem?
Good, very good question. First of all, we don't produce to stock. We abolished that long time ago. So we produce only on an order. So anything that rolls off a production line in one of our sites, it will say KT Trygid, and it will have your delivery address on it, and your specification, colors, fabrics, everything you asked for. So we the outbound warehouse in our factory is actually empty every afternoon at 5. So that's done. The thing with 3D printing, this might get technical, is that there's physical limits of how fast and how resource efficient it can actually be. So if you have production at scale, it's not physically possible for a 3D printing process to be as resource efficient as an injection molding process, for instance. However, if you're thinking of spare parts down the road, then there is an opportunity, and we're contemplating these days on some products that will be out later this year and earlier into new year to why don't we eventually move to open source kind of spare parts system? Say that, look, we'll have the spare parts for you, but if you're located somewhere distance, here's the file. Have it printed, and it will work for you. Maybe that's better. But for the most resource efficient production in volumes, unfortunately, there is no sign of 3D printing being a better solution than conventional methods. But producing to stock has to go. As a principle across industries, I think wherever possible, producing to stock has to go, because then the sheer amount of waste or new products that are thrown away through obsolescence is just staggering.
So I think that's an interesting point, looking at those emerging technologies. Susie, SINTEF's mission is technology for a better society. Which technologies are emerging that we ought to be getting excited about if it's not 3D printing?
Oh, well, 3D printing is exciting, just in the right application. And say, for example, it might not work best for Christian's products and models, but there are other places like a building site where it might actually be much smarter to do that kind of on-demand printing. Oh, where are the most exciting technologies? Well, I mean, being able to use secondary materials. So what we're referring to as waste today is actually secondary materials, and being able to create systems and products and processes to be able to make regenerative value chains, that instead of gradually getting worse and worse and worse like this, okay, we'll do a little bit better, but basically with downgrading and degenerating all the time. Technologies to enable a regenerative process and product. These are the ones that really excite me, and there's no one magic bullet there. It's lots of people have to work together to create lots of innovations, both in terms of material innovations, new materials, but also new processes, how to produce them, new design for how they can be taken apart, repaired, or so on, and then also a new business model, a new economic system around it. There's no one magic bullet.
Yeah, it's a complicated problem that's going to require complicated solutions. I've got one last question because I'm conscious we're running a little bit over time and I don't want to interrupt people's days too much. So another question, and this is another technology question. The environmental and climate impact is biggest from the raw material extraction stage and production. What is the furniture industry's initiatives to use less materials and lightweight materials in products? So 3D technology and honeycomb design, etc. How does the industry shift to renewable materials and renewable energy production? So there's quite a lot in there. Jan Christian, would you like to dive in on that first, and then perhaps we'll let Christian have the last word before we wrap up?
I'll try to be short, and it's a very good question. First of all our manufacturing is based on 100% renewable energy, and we are also producing our own renewable energy from the solar panels, and we aim to have a surplus before 2025, so we are self-sufficient, but we can also provide the renewables to the grid. And that, going from a fossil-based production to renewable energy will have huge climate impact. So that's a really important thing to do, and we can all do it by investing in renewables, and we have an obligation to do it. Actually, then, for instance, we know as business, as industry, we make a lot of decisions all the time. Basically, we use steel and aluminum, for instance. I could have chosen to buy cheaper steel and aluminum from Eastern Europe. Not a bad thing about Eastern Europe, but different manufacturing. But we have this policy in Vestre that we only source the greenest possible materials available on the planet. For instance, 75% post-consumer recycled aluminum from Norsk Hydro. It comes with 8 times less CO2 emissions than the global average. So I could have increased my profit margin by choosing cheaper aluminum, and the customers will not notice, before the EPDs, because aluminum looks like aluminum, but I know it. But since we are only choosing what is greenest right now, we are not only reducing the emissions in our own manufacturing, in our own products, we're also pushing that industry in the right direction because we create demand for better products. For instance, the steel industry accounts for between 7 to 9% of all the global emissions. We are choosing Swedish steel from SSAB, which comes with 30% less emissions, even though it's more expensive compared to European steel, for instance. And within 5 years from now, the Swedish supplier will have a fossil-free steel. It's called hybrid, where they replace coal with hydrogen and will provide steel without any emissions at all. That's within 5 years from now. But we have to invest. We have to source the right materials, so we create a demand for the new materials. And as I said again, everything is possible. I believe in technology. I believe in innovation. I believe in research. And if we are willing to invest, put right money behind it, and step up also in terms of, as I said, ban products designed to have a short lifespan. So we actually force the market to do something. Then we could, get the results we want.
Christian, last word on that question before I wrap up.
Exactly. So very well phrased, Jan Christian. A few years ago, we actually asked the question about renewable materials to Susie's colleagues in Sweden, Swerea. We asked them to help us navigate renewable-based plastics. Which one to go for, which had the highest potential in terms of lowest possible environmental footprint. And they came back with a very surprising answer to us. They said, don't do it. Don't do it, because nothing that's out there is able to compete with the environmental impact reductions you get when using waste instead. And you're so good at waste, turning waste into new products, and why don't you step it up there? Why don't you improve your practices, migrate it to further products, get better at improving the quality, source better, identify suppliers that are better at sorting, push this thing like the hydro example that Ann-Christian mentioned, or better still go for castings, because then you can get up to 95, very close to 100% post-consumer recycled material in there. So that's what we do on top of employing this new alloy for profiles. So, you know, we do, that's how we push it. The best way to push it is to address the waste problem and the climate crisis at the same time. That provides the strongest impact. And as a closing remark, you know, what we're trying to convey here is that, you know, if you're an industry owner or a leader, you know, this can be navigated, like we've tried to explain to you very clearly. This can be navigated, can be done. If you're an architect or a specifier, you know, you can place the criteria on this. You can add the EPD, the carbon footprint, or energy consumption, or both to your purchasing criteria, and you can navigate. You can push the development. If you're a designer, you can navigate this. You can design projects that do not enable this change, or you can design objects that actually help this change, make sure that it is possible. And if you're an investor, you know, in case of any doubt whether these kind of convictions that I have tried to convey, and Christian as well, if in doubt, we'll have a look at the growth rate of Vestre. You know, have a look at the growth rate of Flock, and make your consideration. You know, this can absolutely be combined, because, you know, these are, you know, people. We're all human. We're all concerned with this, whether we're designers, whether we're industry people, architects, or consumers. We want to make the best choices.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's been an absolutely wonderful discussion. I think we've covered an impressive amount of ground in just over an hour. So thank you, Simon, Jan Christian, Susie and Christian, and thank you all to tuning in from home. I'm going to go and get myself a cinnamon bun. Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.